The shift happens fast when you stop being emotionally movable and start sounding unshakably clear. Manipulative partners can survive your tears, your questions, even your anger, because those still invite negotiation. But the one thing they cannot handle is calm clarity. They cannot bend. Not your volume, not your pain, not your long explanation, your clarity. The moment you become clear, they often become cold, distant, irritated, or suddenly offended. And if that reaction has confused you before, you are not missing anything. You are finally seeing the relationship without the fog they trained you to live inside. Maybe you noticed it after saying no once without apologizing, and everything changed overnight. Maybe their warmth vanished after you asked one simple question they could not dodge. Maybe they were loving while you were flexible, then icy when you became steady. That switch feels personal, but it usually is not about love at all. It is about access, control, emotional leverage, and whether your reality still belongs to them. If you have ever thought, why are they suddenly so cold? Listen carefully. Their coldness is often what shows up when confusion stops working for them. And that matters because most advice tells you to communicate more, softer, longer, better. But with manipulative partners, more explaining often becomes more material for them to twist. You think clarity will fix it, so you keep clarifying your intention, your tone, your heart. Meanwhile, they keep sidestepping the point and studying where your guilt still lives. That is why this pattern feels crazy-making instead of simply painful. You are not just hurt, you are being kept emotionally off balance on purpose. And once you understand the one thing they cannot handle, everything starts making sense. Because their coldness is not random moodiness nearly as often as people think. It is frequently a reaction to losing the version of you they could manage. I know how subtle that can feel while you are still inside it. Nothing looks obviously dramatic at first. It looks like distance, sarcasm, and withheld warmth. It looks like shorter texts after you decline something that normally inconveniences you. It looks like affection disappearing the second you stop over-explaining your schedule, your needs, your limits. It looks like them saying, "Fine, do whatever you want," with that flat voice. And somehow you end up feeling guilty even though you did nothing wrong. That guilt is usually the trap. It pushes you back into overfunctioning for connection. You start reassuring, smoothing, checking, fixing, and chasing the warmth that mysteriously disappeared. Now the focus is no longer what they did. The focus becomes your repair work. That is how manipulation often hides in plain sight inside ordinary relationship conflict. Because real conflict can be worked through. Manufactured confusion keeps you performing for basic peace. A healthy partner may dislike a boundary, but they can still respect one. A manipulative partner treats your boundary like betrayal because it interrupts their preferred arrangement. The arrangement was simple. They wanted access without accountability and closeness without real mutuality. They wanted emotional benefits from you without emotional limits placed on them. So what is this calm clarity they cannot handle without turning cold? It is the moment you stop arguing for your right to have reality. It is when your answer becomes clean, brief, and no longer emotionally available for debate. That does not mean harsh. It means settled, grounded, and not trying to earn permission. You say, "That does not work for me," and leave it there. You say, "I already answered that," and you do not repackage it 5 times. You say, "I am not discussing this right now," and you actually stop discussing it. You said no, not this time, without attaching a little guilt bouquet afterward. That is the moment many manipulative partners start acting like something cruel just happened. Because clarity removes the space where they usually insert pressure, guilt, or confusion. When they cannot move your answer, they often switch to temperature. Warmth was the reward when you were easy to influence. Coldness becomes the punishment afterward. And if you grew up soothing tension, that punishment lands directly on your nervous system. You feel the room change. You feel their face close. You feel yourself scrambling. That scramble is exactly what they are counting on, even if unconsciously. Not every manipulative person is a mastermind sitting there plotting every sentence. Some are emotionally immature, entitled, avoidant, and deeply threatened by limits they cannot override. But intentional or not, the effect on you can be the same. You end up exhausted, self-doubting, and weirdly responsible for every emotional weather shift. That is why naming the pattern matters more than guessing their exact diagnosis. You do not need a label first. You need accuracy about what keeps happening. And what keeps happening is this: your clarity creates consequences for their access. That is why their coldness often appears right after a boundary, not before. They may say you are distant now, difficult, selfish, dramatic, or impossible to please. But listen closely to what those accusations usually mean underneath the surface. Difficult often means harder to control than before. Selfish often means less available for use. Dramatic can mean you are naming something they preferred to keep blurred and deniable. Any changed often means you stopped absorbing what was never yours to carry. That sentence alone has freed a lot of people from unnecessary guilt. Because yes, you changed, you got clearer, you noticed the price of confusion. You stopped calling emotional instability chemistry and started calling it instability. You stopped mistaking unpredictability for passion and pressure for closeness. You started seeing how often your kindness was being converted into access. And suddenly their coldness became information instead of a mystery you had to solve. That shift is powerful because coldness loses some control once it becomes readable. Instead of thinking, "What did I do wrong?" you start asking something better. What happened right before they turned cold, and what did they stop getting? That question changes everything because it exposes the sequence, not just the emotion. Maybe they asked where you were, and you answered briefly without over-explaining. Maybe they pushed for sex, time, money, access, or reassurance, and you did not cave. Maybe you brought up the way they flirt publicly and dismiss privately. Maybe you said, "We are not doing this tonight," after another circular argument started spinning. Maybe you stopped defending yourself against accusations clearly designed to keep you talking. And the second you did, they went emotionally unavailable, offended, or strangely superior. That is not always heartbreak. Sometimes that is strategy wearing a wounded expression. A manipulative partner often needs motion. Defending, pleading, explaining, proving, fixing, apologizing, chasing. That motion keeps you occupied while they keep control of the emotional frame. Calm clarity interrupts the motion, and they feel the loss immediately. So they go cold, because coldness can still pull you back in emotion. You start wondering if they are hurt, if you were too blunt, too harsh, too distant. You begin rewriting your words in your head, searching for some softer version. You want to rescue the silence because the silence feels like a threat. And now we need to be precise. Not all silence is manipulation. Sometimes healthy people take space so they can calm down and return respectfully. Manipulative coldness is different because the intention is not regulation. The intention is pressure. It is silence that punishes, distance that controls, withdrawal that trains you to surrender. You can feel the difference in your body, even before your mind accepts it. Healthy space feels temporary and honest. Manipulative coldness feels loaded, vague, and coercive. One leaves dignity intact. The other makes you feel like you must earn basic warmth. That is why your body gets anxious so fast around it. Your system is reading a pattern that your hope keeps trying to excuse. And if you have been in this dynamic long enough, you may over-explain automatically. You may answer unasked questions, soften every limit, and apologize for ordinary preferences. You may think, "If I can just say it perfectly, they will finally understand." But many manipulative partners understand you just fine. They simply dislike your conclusion. That is a brutal truth, but is also a liberating one. Because once you stop mistaking resistance for confusion, your strategy changes immediately. You stop giving TED Talks about why you deserve basic respect. You stop defending boundaries that should have been heard the first time. You stop trying to win fairness from someone invested in emotional advantage. Instead, your language gets shorter, cleaner, and less emotionally expensive. "I am available during work hours, not after midnight," is enough. My answer is the same, is enough when they keep circling back. "I'm not available for that," is enough when they push your limit again. "We can talk when this is respectful," is enough when the tone turns slippery. And sometimes the strongest sentence is simply "no," followed by silence. That silence matters, because manipulative partners feed on your urge to fill it. They know many kind people cannot tolerate relational discomfort for more than 10 seconds. So they stare, withdraw, sigh, or act shocked, waiting for your self-betrayal. Do not rescue the silence, let it show you who needs control most. Keep your tone flat, keep your face relaxed. Say less than feels natural. The more charged they become, the more useful your steadiness becomes. Because the real shift is not getting them to approve your boundary. The real shift is refusing to abandon yourself when they disapprove of it. That is where self-respect starts becoming visible, not just privately felt. And manipulative partners notice that visibility immediately because it changes the whole power structure. Before, they could create uncertainty and watch you work to restore connection. Now they create uncertainty and find themselves standing there alone with it. That is deeply uncomfortable for someone who depends on emotional leverage. So yes, they may turn cold, but notice what the coldness is saying. It is saying, your old buttons are not working as well anymore. It is saying, I feel less powerful when you stop auditioning for fairness. It is saying, I lost my easy access to your emotional labor. And here is the deeper part most people miss at first. Coldness is not always a sign they love you less. Sometimes it proves they felt entitled. Entitlement gets offended when access becomes conditional, even if the condition is basic respect. That is why they can act like the victim after crossing your line. They do not just want closeness. They want closeness without being interrupted by your autonomy. Your autonomy is the one thing that exposes whether their affection was actually respectful. A healthy partner might be disappointed, but they stay connected to reality. They do not suddenly punish you because you needed sleep, space, privacy, or honesty. They do not weaponize warmth whenever they stop getting their preferred outcome. They may need a conversation, but they do not make you pay emotionally. That distinction alone can save years of confusion in the wrong relationship. Because once you see that coldness follows your clarity, the pattern stops feeling random. It becomes diagnostic, not of your worth, but of their tolerance for your independence. And independence in relationships does not mean detachment, distance, or being impossible to reach. It means your selfhood does not disappear whenever someone else is displeased. That is not control. That is the opposite of control. The boundary is about what you will do to protect your peace. Control is trying to force someone else to feel, act, or choose differently. Manipulative partners blur those two things because it helps them recast your limit as aggression. They say things like, wow, so now everything has to be your way. But notice the trick. Your no is not controlling them. It is containing you. You are not forcing their behavior. You are refusing participation in behavior that harms you. That difference matters, especially if guilt has been used against you for years. And guilt often shows up strongest when you are finally doing something healthy. A manipulative partner may suddenly seem fragile, abandoned, misunderstood, or deeply hurt. They may say, I guess I just cannot do anything right around you. They may go quiet for hours, then reappear like you caused a catastrophe. They may become weirdly polite, like strangers, just to punish emotional distance with emotional distance. They may compliment you less, touch you less, and act inconveniently unavailable. And if you are used to earning closeness, that shift can pull you right back. This is where you need a deeper rule, not just a temporary script. Do not measure the truth of your boundary by their reaction to it. Measure it by what the boundary was protecting in the first place. Were you protecting your sleep, your dignity, your time, your body, your privacy, your sanity? Then their reaction is information, but it is not your instruction. You do not need their comfort to confirm what your nervous system already knows. Sometimes the most mature thing you can do is stop explaining and observe. Observe whether they calm down and come back with respect. Observe whether they stay cold until you soften, apologize, or reopen the door. Observe whether every conflict somehow ends with your self-erasure as the peace offering. Patterns tell the truth faster than promises ever will. And if you are thinking, but they can also be loving, of course. Manipulative partners are rarely cold all the time. If they were, leaving would be easier. The confusion lives in the alternation, the swing between tenderness and emotional penalty. Warmth arrives when access returns. Coldness arrives when control weakens. That cycle creates attachment, hope, and the exhausting belief that your technique is the problem. It is not always your technique. Sometimes the system itself is the problem. And once you see that, your job changes from fixing to deciding. Not deciding everything tonight. Not making some huge dramatic exit this second. Sometimes strategy matters more than confrontation, especially if finances, safety, or housing are involved. But internally, the decision begins when you stop calling coldness love and pain. Sometimes coldness is simply control and disappointment. Sometimes distance is not healing space. Sometimes it is punishment with plausible deniability. Sometimes the sentence, I need time, is true. Sometimes it means, come chase me. You will know which one it is by what happens next. Real time apart leads back to clarity, ownership, and respectful conversation. Manipulative coldness leads back to your guilt, your confusion, and their untouched behavior. That is why the one thing they cannot handle is your calm, non-negotiable clarity. Because clarity ends the fantasy that love means tolerating whatever destabilizes you. Clarity stops begging for crumbs and starts protecting the whole table. Clarity says, I can feel sad and still keep my boundary. Clarity says, your coldness is uncomfortable, but my self-betrayal costs more. Clarity says, if warmth only appears when I surrender, that warmth was never safe. And maybe that is the line you needed to hear today. You are not too sensitive. You are responding to emotional conditions disguised as intimacy. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for consistency without punishment. You are not becoming cruel when you got clearer. You are becoming harder to manipulate. If this hits something real for you, pay attention where the coldness appears. Watch what happens after your next calm. No, your next pause, your next unshaken answer. And if you are tired of earning warmth by abandoning yourself, stay here. Leave a comment with the phrase calm clarity if this finally named your experience. And subscribe if you want more language for protecting your peace without becoming hard. The moment they turn cold is often the moment you finally become free.